The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a flickering candle on the nightstand. I felt his breath against my neck, warm and unsteady, as his hands traced the curves of my body with a hesitancy that betrayed the storm within him. Marcus was unlike anyone I had ever known, dangerous and broken, with secrets that clung to him like a second skin. I tilted my head back, letting him kiss me, his lips moving with a fervor that felt almost desperate. His hands were rough, calloused from years of struggle, but they held me like I was something fragile, something he wasn't sure he deserved to touch. Our bodies moved together, slow at first, then faster, a rhythm born of urgency and need. For a moment, I let myself believe this was real, that we were two people finding solace in each other, not two shadows colliding in the dark. His touch grew more assured as the storm in him seemed to dissipate, replaced by something raw and unfiltered. His hands roamed my body with a mixture of reverence and hunger, as though he was mapping every inch of me for fear of forgetting. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls, but I didn't notice anything except the heat of his skin against mine, the way his lips claimed mine with a need that was almost overwhelming. My fingers traced the line of his shoulders, his back, feeling the tension that had built within him, slowly melting away under my touch. He moved with an intensity that matched the pounding of my heart, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered my name. There was something unspoken between us, a desperate kind of connection that neither of us could fully articulate. I responded to him instinctively, every movement synchronized, every kiss deepening the bond between us. The rhythm of our bodies was urgent but deliberate, as though we were trying to capture something fleeting, something we knew wouldn't last, but needed to hold on to for as long as we could. Marcus's arm draped over my waist, his fingers lightly brushing against my skin, as if to reassure himself that I was still there. I turned my head to look at him, and for a moment I saw something vulnerable in his eyes. A glimpse of the man beneath the mystery, the pain and the secrets. I wanted to reach for that part of him, to hold on to it, but before I could, he closed his eyes and exhaled, retreating into himself once more. All I could do was lie there, wondering if I'd ever truly know the man who had just made me feel so alive. He stared at the ceiling, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share, while I traced invisible patterns on his arm. "What are you running from?" I asked softly, though I already knew he wouldn't answer. He turned to me, his eyes dark and haunted, and pressed a kiss to my forehead before retreating into the silence that seemed to define him. My name is Lydia Hart, and my life has always been tethered to secrets. My mother, a voodoo priestess, died when I was a child, leaving me with whispers of rituals and shadows I didn't understand. I grew up in the backwaters of Louisiana, surrounded by the mysticism and darkness that seemed to seep into the soil. I thought I left it all behind until Marcus Kane walked into my life. He was a private detective, hired by someone he wouldn't name, searching for a man I barely remembered. Daniel Croft, my father, a man who had abandoned us long ago, leaving nothing but pain in his wake. Marcus came to me with questions, but it was clear he was looking for more than answers. He was a man chasing demons, though whether they were his own or someone else's, I couldn't tell. I should have stayed away. I knew the kind of danger that followed men like him, but something about Marcus drew me in. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like I held the key to something he'd been searching for his entire life. Or maybe it was the way his hands lingered on mine, as though he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. We had spent the next day unraveling secrets, piecing together fragments of a story that grew darker with every turn. By nightfall, we were both exhausted, the weight of what we had discovered pressing down on us like a suffocating fog. In the quiet of my small bedroom, Marcus pulled me to him, his hands trembling as they found my waist. This time, there was no hesitation, no slow build. His lips crashed against mine with an intensity that bordered on violence, and I met him with equal force, pouring all my fear and frustration into the moment. Our movements were frantic, almost chaotic, as though we were trying to escape something neither of us could name. His hands gripped my hips, pulling me closer, and I clung to him like he was the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. Marcus's body pressed against mine with a heat that burned away the cold dread lingering from the day's revelations. His hands moved over me with a feverish urgency, gripping and exploring as though he was trying to etch the memory of this moment into his soul. His lips trailed down my neck, leaving a trail of fire in their wake, and I arced against him, needing to feel every part of him, needing to lose myself in the storm of his touch. The weight of what we had discovered disappeared, replaced by the raw, primal need to connect, to feel alive. His fingers found my skin beneath the thin fabric of my dress, sliding it from my shoulders and letting it fall to the floor in a soft whisper. I pushed his shirt up, my palms tracing the contours of his chest, memorizing the strength beneath the surface. His breathing was rugged as his hands moved to lift me, my back pressed against the cool wall, a sharp contrast to the heat building between us. Every movement was desperate, a rhythm born of shared desperation and the unspoken truth we were both afraid to face. When we finally collapsed onto the bed, our bodies tangled together. I could feel his heart pounding against mine. His arms wrapped around me tightly, as though he feared letting go would shatter whatever fragile connection we had built. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that this could be enough, that we could find solace in each other. But as Marcus's breathing evened out, his grip on me loosening, I knew this night was as much a farewell as it was a surrender. Whatever lay ahead was darker than either of us could comprehend. But for now, I let myself be held in the eye of the storm. He told me about the man who had hired him, a shadowy figure named Lucian Cypher, who seemed to know more about Marcus than he did himself. As the days passed, the pieces began to fall into place, revealing a darker truth than everything I could have imagined. Marcus wasn't just searching for Daniel Croft, he was searching for himself. The man he had been hired to find was the man he had once been. A man who had traded his soul for power and forgotten the deal he had made. I watched as Marcus unraveled, the weight of his discoveries threatening to crush him. I tried to save him, to pull him back from the brink, but he was already too far gone. The night he left, he kissed me one last time, his lips lingering on mine as though trying to memorize the taste of me. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking, and then he was gone. Now, I sit in the quiet of my home, haunted by the memory of a man who was both my salvation and my undoing. Marcus Kane was a shadow, a fleeting glimpse of something real in a world full of illusions. And though he's gone, his story lingers, a reminder that the darkest truths are often the ones we carry within ourselves.